Morning, Stackers. Welcome to a fun episode of Money in the Morning. That'd be great. Nope, we were not at all ready to go live yet, and I'd had this scheduled, and if I didn't go live, Facebook kicks you out. So you got the you got the logo for a while we prepped. I'm still not ready, but we're getting close. I have to have some exciting TV time here as I write a little piece. I just got back from Kansas City, and what a great town. Every time I go to Kansas City, it's unbelievable. We had so much fun. Okay, I messed that up. I know this is exciting TV. Hey, do a quick sound check. Don't need that. That's good. Boy, what a pain. Okay. Guys, ready to have some fun? We have a few people with us. Today's mug is uh-oh. It's my friend Walt Disney. It's a mug that says Vision. And then there's Walt in front of a castle that only exists in his brain. All right. This is going to be for tomorrow. So unless something big happens today that we need to record one later today to catch whatever news that we might have, this is going to be tomorrow's podcast. All right. You guys ready? Got to help me out with this. So you have comments, questions, whatever. Add those in. This show is all about the live Facebook studio audience. So do your part, kids. Here we go. We've all heard this story before, the three little pigs, haven't we? You know, the one where one builds his house of sticks, other one builds his house of stone. Big bad wolf comes along. Bad things happen to the dude with the sticks. End up having a nice pork dinner, does the wolf. Speaking of that, by the way, I just went to Kansas City. Oh my goodness. I just had some of the best barbecue. I know that there's barbecue fights all over the United States and elsewhere, but Kansas City, you got it going on. And Arthur Bryant's restaurant, just what a classic, even being in there. Maybe not the best barbecue I've ever had, but phenomenal and just a testament to it. But that's not the story of the three little pigs eating barbecue. It's a great end to that story, but that's not the end, is it? The end is it the pig who built things out of brick? The bricks saved the day. And today we're going to talk about bricks. Let's talk about stones. Let's talk about twigs. Let's talk about bourbon. How about that on today's Money in the Morning? Live from my mom's half-finished basement. It's the show where we have two financial headlines ripped from the recent press. We not only read them to you, we also talk about them, talk about what's important about those headlines. And then, as if that's not enough, at the end of the show, we take the two of them and we have a big idea that you can take with you throughout the day. And we call that podcast Money in the Morning. Glad you're here with us. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And today's podcast is brought to you by M1 Finance. M1 Finance helps you hit the easy button when it comes to your financial picture. Head to stackybenjamins.com/M1 Finance, and you'll see why we like M1 Finance so much. We've got two headlines, though, that we like a lot today. So why don't we get this party started?
Here come two headlines ripped from the financial press, only at Money in the Morning.
Only at Money in the Morning. Thanks, Laura. This first piece comes to us from CNN Money. Why GE may need to stop paying its dividend after 119 years. You think about that, 119 years of dividends. And yet, might stop. Might not have any dividends starting, well, very soon. Let's talk about this. It's written by Matt Egan. General Electric is sitting on a mountain of debt accumulated by a series of bad deals, shrinking revenue, and a huge pension shortfall. That debt's now making it difficult for the maker of light bulbs and jet engines to afford its dividend payout to shareholders. Quote, we think the most prudent action would be for GE to consider suspending its common dividend for the next 18 months, Goldman Sachs analyst Joe Ritchie wrote in a report published on Thursday night. Quote, GE's in a challenging situation, Ritchie wrote, adding that putting the dividend on hold would save the company $6 billion that can be used to pay down debt. Suspending the dividend would be the latest blow for GE, which is getting kicked out of the exclusive Dow Jones Industrial Average. GE was an original member of the Dow in 1896 and has been in it continuously since 1907. GE's already taken drastic action on the dividend, which millions of shareholders rely on. Last fall, the conglomerate cut the dividend in half, making just the second time since the Great Depression that it touched the coveted payout. GE's paid a dividend each year since 1899, according to Howard Silverblatt of S&P Dow Jones Indices. GE's also racing to raise cash by selling off businesses, including one central to the company's identity. It's trying to find a buyer for the light bulb division that Thomas Edison founded. Last month, GE also reached a deal to unload the century-old railroad business. Yet, GE's financial problems are huge. Total debt since 2013 has nearly tripled to $77 billion, according to Moody's. That includes GE's large pension shortfall, which is the biggest of the S&P 500 companies. This piece goes on, and if you want more on that, you can get it at my Twitter page. Holy cow, couldn't come up with the words. At my Twitter page, Average Joe Money will have the link to that. It's frustrating for a lot of people. And they talk about GE in this piece relying on dividends, people relying on these dividends because they paid them out so religiously over time. What's interesting about a dividend is I know a lot of investors that think, hey, I'll build a dividend producing portfolio. I'll find these companies that pay a dividend, and then they'll buy those. And then they're surprised when a company like General Electric stops paying the dividend. And yet that dividend isn't guaranteed. There is nothing about a dividend that says they have to continue to do it. And that confuses a lot of investors. Wait a minute. Investors are up in arms going, wait a minute. You said you've paid this dividend. Doesn't matter. And if you think, we talk a lot on here about thinking about your money as if you're a company. If you think about General Electric and what what Goldman Sachs is saying, the Goldman Sachs analyst in this piece is saying, getting rid of the dividend makes a ton of sense. If I'm managing my company and I've got a ton of debt and I'm paying out all this money to every month to the people that are in the family, why wouldn't I unfortunately tell those people, hey, tighten the belt and we'll make things better long-term? I like the idea of slowing down the dividend much better than I like selling off businesses. As one great man said, you can't shrink your way to greatness, right? You can't become a better company by getting rid of more and more and more divisions, and especially these divisions that GE is good at. And it's interesting to see the change, by the way, in GE over time. GE under Jack Welch made some huge changes, all based on the fact of being number one or being number two in a business. And as they tightened that business and made that business smaller, look at what's happened now. Businesses have changed. What's hot has changed, and GE's place in those businesses have changed. So it makes you wonder longer term if being number one or number two or sell it off actually does make sense. I mean, so many people have taken that phrase to the bank now since Jack Welch originally said it. Does it make sense that they got rid of them just because they weren't number one and number two at the time, like fighting back in those areas? We'll never know. I get it at the time. Be good at what you're good at. Get rid of other things. Clearly, GE, maybe selling off those businesses was the right move, but moving and making sure that you're great at those businesses that you were great at the time, that's so difficult, isn't it? Easier, much, much easier said than done. GE stopping the dividend. I think the big lesson for you and I is that dividends not guaranteed, and staying on top of your portfolio and seeing the companies continue to do what they're doing. Listen, if you're going to invest in individual companies, you got to stay on top of those companies. And people say, oh, I don't have time. It's why a lot of people talk about indexing. But with individual companies and less diversification, you can make more money. Now, I know I'm going to get emails about that. Joe, it's crazy. People don't. Yes, they do. People do make more money. However, those same investors also make less money sometimes, right? You get rid of diversification, you have fewer companies that your net worth is based on, the standard deviation is going to go up. And what that means is you can make a lot more money, but you can also lose a lot more money. It's why investing all your blah, blah, blah. That's why I love doing these live on Facebook. When my tongue doesn't play along, it makes it much more fun radio. Let's try that again. If you invest in a single business in your hometown, like a restaurant, like we talked about last week, if you invest in a single restaurant, huge standard deviation. And by the way, history is not in your favor if you do that either. So I like this idea of dividends not being guaranteed. Revisit your dividend, weed the portfolio. I think if you stay on top of it, dividend portfolios can be a great way to go. Hey, let's say hi to everybody hanging out with us on Facebook today. We have a quiet little group, but Ryan's here. Kimberly's here. We spent a little time before the podcast today just kind of getting the let out because it's weird being back here in the basement after a few days away, recording a new episode. For those of you listening, we actually recorded yesterday's episode a little ways back. And so I got my coffee, got the group on Facebook with us. Thanks everybody for playing along. All right, let's move on to our second headline, which is also, by the way, one that we found at CNN. Usually we don't have both of our headlines from the same place, but this one was so bad that I almost cried. This is horrible. You know, we've had some bad headlines like GE losing the dividend is bad for some people. It can be horrible for some people. This is a absolute tragedy. Listen to this. 9,000, count them, 9,000 barrels of bourbon fall in Kentucky distillery building collapse. 9,000 barrels of bourbon fall in Kentucky distillery building collapse. Doesn't it make your heart sink? Oh, it's absolutely horrible. Devastation. This is written by Anya Archie and Phil Gast. Pardon bourbon lovers for crying in their beer after half the barrels being aged at Kentucky distillery building fell to the ground when part of the structure collapsed. About 9,000 stacked bourbon barrels plummeted to the ground last Friday at Barton 1792 distillery, home of the brand 1792 bourbon. The building, which holds up to 20,000 barrels, was having a wall repaired. The collapse brought down half the structure. Bardstown Police Chief Billy Mattingly said there was no one inside when the roof caved in, so no injuries were reported. That's good news. But let's go back to 9,000 barrels of bourbon. Isn't that horrible? It's unclear whether the bourbon spilled from the containers, but a nearby creek was of concern because of the structure's position on a hill. Representatives from the state's Department for Environmental Protection were dispatched to the scene. And I know it's not a laughing matter and what all the alcohol in your in your water supply means, but just for a second, imagine that fish. Like at first, it could be the best day ever. Holy cow, I'm feeling good. Later on, not so good. But early on, good day for some fish. Later on, maybe a little hard to swim. But the water's fine. Water samples came back clean, according to CNN affiliate WLKY. Distillery officials did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Building's owner, the Cesarac company, also could not be reached. Typically, each barrel holds 53 gallons of bourbon. 9,000 barrels fell and weighs about 550 pounds. Imagine trying to pick that stuff up. You know, it's funny. You never know when the bad day is going to come, right? You know that something bad's going to happen. You know that it's right around the corner, and yet you don't know when it's going to happen. And that's why contingency plans, once again, thinking about your money as if you're a business, right? Contingency plans make sense, but I don't want to talk about that. We may talk about that a little bit later. Here's the thing. Do you think the price, and this is a good economics lesson, 9,000 barrels fall. What do you think happened to the price of 1792 bourbon? I was joking about bourbon earlier, not really a bourbon drinker myself, but I'll bet that made the price go up because scarcity sells product. And even though this is horrible for the company, obviously they're going to lose money hand over fist because of this. Hopefully they have the appropriate insurance in place and they'll have a big fat insurance claim. I hope all that stuff happens. Scarcity sells product. And it's funny because we need to think about this when it comes to our purchasing decisions. Brands try to be hot so that we purchase that brand, right? And you have to ask yourself whether I'm buying the brand because I have this fear of missing out, right? We have this FOMO going on. And we see this a lot when it comes to cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are the place right now. In January, it looked like everybody's going to buy the last one. We had such a run on cryptocurrencies, and yet then the bottom fell out and recovery happened there, meaning the price fell in some places in half or more. In cryptos, we saw that big time, this huge fear missing out. Scarcity sells product. So whenever I think about this, whether it's a crypto, whether it's my stocks, or no matter what it is, I want to think about this. What's everybody else buying? And then can I look the other way and maybe find a deal over in a place where people aren't yet buying? Now, the bad news is there's got to be a catalyst that makes people want to start buying. But I don't want to buy. When everybody else is buying, I want to be a seller. When everybody else is a seller, I want to be a buyer. And that's a difficult thing to do. I'm a person that over time, because I was managing so much money for other people for a long period of time, I had to train myself that when collapses happen, that was the time to put money in, right? And now that's my natural feeling. I hear a headline where something bad happened and other people are selling. I'm in there buying because I think a couple of things. As an example, let's say that this company was a public company. If this company's public, immediately we get scarcity. We get some horrible stuff. We investigate whether there's insurance that's going to pay out or not. If the insurance is going to pay, then they're fine and they're at least somewhat whole. And when the product comes back, prices have already gone up on existing products in this bourbon business. And now maybe they can sell that for more money. This could end up being, in other words, a very, very good thing for this manufacturer, as long as it's not permanent, right? In the case of GE, I don't know where the bottom is. I initially bought some GE stock when GE first started going down, not understanding it enough. Like I fell for it, man. I thought GE was a perfect thing to buy, but it turned out that GE has lots and lots and lots of financial problems. So I think there's a lesson here, which is not just that scarcity sells products, but also that over time, if the price goes down and we get why the price went down, we can get some value, but that's not always the case. Still got some buyer beware, right? Good stuff there. We finally got some chatter happening with our live studio Facebook audience. Jesse's here. Hey, Jesse. Chris says scarcity or the perception of scarcity. Sometimes the perception is more potent. That's interesting that you say that, Chris, because you and I have both seen these lots of cars, right, that nobody's ever going to buy, so that they tighten the supply of cars so that you buy the car without these huge markdowns, right? Sometimes companies make too much of it, and keeping the perception of scarcity is important. You talk about Tesla. Tesla doesn't negotiate the price of the car. You go to buy a Tesla, you're going to pay what the price is. If you got a Tesla on sale, congratulations, because that doesn't normally happen. The perception of scarcity is clearly there. And that's a lot of what happened in crypto back in January. I mean, if we just look back at that, huge part. Kimberly says, I invest in bourbon, but it doesn't last long enough to be a long-term investment. But I invest in wine the same way, Kimberly. I'm all about the go down to the store, invest in wine, sit it on the counter as my investment for maybe an hour, 2 hours. I let the investment mature a little bit. Sometimes I'll open it up to let it mature and then have a taste test. And generally 2 or 3 days later, I enjoyed my investment, right? Hey, we're going to have a big idea putting these two headlines together in the same place. How do we do that? I have no idea. You got to stick around for that. But first, let's talk about M1 Finance, because if you head to stackingbenjamins.com/M1 Finance, what you'll find is that M1 Finance is the place where you can take your robo-advisor, but then on the other side, you can do it yourself. You can have multiple pies in the same place. How do you do that? It's called M1 Finance, stackingbenjamins.com/M1 Finance. By the way, if you use that link when you go to M1 Finance to open an account, what you'll what I should tell you is that they send us a little thank you for that. And that's how you support Money in the Morning. If you support the companies that support Money in the Morning, you support us and the show stays on the air. But we only talk about companies that we love. We talk about M1 Finance. We talk about Tiller. We have a new one coming on later this week that I'm very excited about, Lemonade. We're going to be talking about some lemonade here in the next few days. And of course, Fam Zoo we talk about here. Man, we're getting chattery here on Facebook. I love you people. You crack me up. Chris says, Tesla also building cars in tents these days, so I'll pass even if it is on sale. Right. Tesla's got some huge issues right now, Chris. I totally agree. Production issues at Tesla. Ryan says, just sitting here sipping my single malt scotch. And what people listening don't know is we record this at 4:30 in the morning. So Ryan with his single malt scotch, 4:30 a.m. Nice job. Good work. I'm joking, of course. All right. So we had two headlines today. The first one was about General Electric. And our big deal with General Electric was that they might, after 119 years, might have to stop that dividend. At least that's what Goldman Sachs analysts are saying. It sounds like a reasonable idea to help them get out of debt. Tighten the belt when things are tight. And our takeaway is also for investors, dividends aren't guaranteed. Our second headline, which initially was funny, but we were able to, I think, make some good stuff out of, 9,000 barrels of bourbon fell when a wall collapsed at a distillery. And our takeaway, scarcity sells product, but it also is, to Chris's point in our live Facebook audience, scarcity not only sells product, the thought that it might be scarce sells product. I also like the idea that you need to think contrarian. When everybody else is thinking something's hot, look the other way. I love that. A company, Templeton, Sir John Templeton, great international investor, used to always do that. And that was his claim to fame, was that if everybody's looking left, that means he automatically looks right. Everybody else selling, I'm a buyer. Everybody else buying, I'm selling. A great thing there. So how do we combine these two headlines? I think our big takeaway today, when it comes to General Electric, not being number one anymore in a lot of businesses and really falling on some hard times. And also when it comes to this Barton 1792 bourbon disaster, a backup plan makes a bunch of sense. And I know General Electric's had backup plans, and I'm sure that this distillery had backup plans. For you and I, though, I often see people don't have a backup plan. If a wall falls at a distillery, what do we do next? If something happens in your life, what do you do next? Coming up with those backup plans, by the way, sounds like a pain in the butt when you're first doing it, but I'll tell you, the process of writing down your backup plan. What happens if my house burns down? What happens if a tornado hits? I remember going through our plan if a tornado hit our house when our kids were young. And what was cool was our local school brought the kids home with that, saying, hey, the school said we should come up with a plan if a tornado hits. And I remember at first going, oh, really, I got to help my kids with my homework. I thought it was pretty fun. It was pretty cool talking about teaching my kids what happens if a tornado comes. Because what's really happening is that, and you and I know this, I'm not really teaching them as much as I'm teaching all of us, right? I'm coming up with some of the stuff on the spot, but it's pretty darn good. And a lot of the time, even as parents, and we say, hey, I'll think about that. No, you're not going to think about it. You're going to make a spot decision 5 hours later when the kid asks again. Same thing with these contingency plans. Putting your contingency plan in action and actually writing it down, pretty thrilling once you have it. Pretty exciting to know, you know what, my butt's covered. And I'll tell you, for those of you that are worried about being aggressive with your investments, if you have a contingency plan, that helps you stay aggressive when everybody else can't be aggressive, because you know that your backside's covered. And that, I think, is our big takeaway today on Money in the Morning. And Eric is here. Hey, Eric. Eric says, hope GE has a backup plan. If you're a GE investor, Eric, I hope so too. If not, I actually hope so for people that work there, people that rely on that dividend. Hey, I'm Joe Saul-Sehy. Thanks for hanging out at Money in the Morning. We'll see you again here next time.
Money in the Morning is created by Joe Saul-Sehy and is brought to our channels by our producer and engineer, Richie Rutter-Reese. Stacking Benjamins and Money in the Morning are for entertainment purposes. Before making moves, consult with your financial advisor. Looking for training sessions? Kathleen Selmans has a great suite of Stacking Benjamins tools, so head on over to learn.stackingbenjamins.com. Hoping to chat with us on the web? Say hello to Shannon Cowan, our social media guru and community manager in our Facebook group. She can be found at stackingbenjamins.com/basement. From the basement, I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. See you tomorrow.
I read that bourbon headline and I thought, oh, that's for me. That is totally for me. And you guys are so funny. Good stuff there. We're only doing one of these today. We have a lot of writing to do today. We have a lot of recording to do today. So we're going to reload. And tomorrow we may do two, but more likely do two on Wednesday. So you'll probably see us here twice. We'll probably see us here once tomorrow and then twice on Wednesday. And today I actually advertised that we were coming. Usually we just show up for those of you that are hanging out that are new. But I put it up there ahead of time. I'll try as hard as I can to put up ahead of time too when we're going to be live, because I love the back and forth. Once we get the back and forth going, I think that makes better radio for the audio podcast. I think it's a lot of fun. So thanks a ton for helping out today. I appreciate it. And we'll see you guys later.